Everybody, welcome to College, the podcast. I'm Peg Keogh. Today I'll be chatting with Peter Pitts. Peter has 42 years of experience as an admissions rep at several liberal arts colleges. Today we're going to be talking all about liberal arts colleges. What students thrive at liberal arts colleges? What do they have to offer? And a lot more. So stick around. We've got a lot to unpack that I know you're going to want to hear. Hello, everybody. I am super excited today to have what I know is going to be a really interesting conversation with a gentleman that we connected online and chatted. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to have this guy on our podcast. He's interesting and he's got this super cool background all around liberal arts colleges. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. Who I have with me, his name is Peter Pitts. Thank you for being here, Peter. Super excited. He has 42 years. He's retired now, happily retired, but still very busy. But before he retired, he had 42 years in college admissions as a representative at liberal arts colleges, mostly smaller liberal arts colleges. 27 of them were at Monmouth College in Illinois, not to be confused with Monmouth University in Jersey. But so obviously tons and tons of experience, a lot of thoughts around this. And it's a really cool niche of a type of college that is a great fit for a lot of kids. And there's a lot of misconceptions slash urban myths around liberal arts colleges and all different things. So I really wanted to have Peter on today for us to chat all about this. So you really get in the weeds. And as you're listening, you can think about, hey, is this kind of school? If you're a student, could this be a fit for me? Or if you're a parent, thinking about your kids, it might be a good next chapter for them. At a liberal arts college. And then I did say Peter's retired, but he's been very busy. So he's written a bunch of books. So he is out there. If you're on social media, you might even be like, oh yeah, I know Peter. So he might not be a new face to you. So again, welcome, Peter. Do you want to take a minute, just say hi before we dive in here?
Oh, not really. Let's just dive right into it.
Okay. All right. So liberal arts colleges. So let's take a minute to just talk about, let's just start at the basics here. What is a liberal arts college?
Most of the liberal arts colleges are relatively small. I mean, most of them are 3,500 students or less. Even the really highly ranked small private colleges tend to be 3,500 students or less. What sets liberal arts colleges apart is not so much the majors, but the fact that they offer a wider array of offerings. It isn't just technical stuff. It's learning a little bit about art, a little bit about history, a little bit about religion, a little bit about philosophy, and so on and so forth, but still majoring in engineering or majoring in nursing or majoring in business administration. The myth about liberal arts colleges is that they don't have things like engineering. What they don't realize is that there's 122 small colleges in this country that have the ABET accreditation for engineering. They're all really small colleges, 3,500 students or less, and 110 of those schools are liberal arts institutions. So the students at the liberal arts institutions, yes, they're taking their engineering, but they're also learning about other important things. They take sociology, they take psychology, they take religion, they take a little bit of everything so that they're a more well-rounded individual. A lot of employers, they'll hire people sometimes for the really big technical schools, big universities, for little niche areas within engineering. But in terms of management, for example, they prefer people that know how to write well, people who know how to speak well. And a lot of times at small private colleges, that's what happens. You learn to speak well, you learn to write well, in addition to learning the technical type
Well,
things.
and you also learn, and correct me if I'm wrong, you learn how to work in groups and, engineers as a stereotype are thought of as not super social and more aloof, that kind of thing. And they learn how to be in group work and interact with others effectively, right? And that's
Oh,
important
definitely.
in a lot of professional
Yeah.
positions.
Yeah, the small private liberal arts colleges are really for the student who wants to do it all. They don't want to just major in this. They also want to be in marching band. They also want to be involved in on the speech team. They also want to give tours of campus. They also want to be president of their fraternity or their sorority. Speaking of which, another misconception has to do with Greek life. Most of the really top ranked Greek life groups in the United States are at the small private liberal arts colleges, not the big
Oh,
universities. There was an article I read once. I wish I could remember the source. I apologize. But they listed the 50 top ones, which the top Greek life systems, at different colleges. 30 of the 50 were small private liberal arts colleges. They had higher grade point averages. They did more community service. They had less incidences of hazing, for example. All the things that make for a positive Greek life happen more at the small private colleges than they do at the bigger universities. Now, the big universities, they get a bigger name.
yeah.
But like you've got, you're at Monmouth, for example, where I worked for 27 years, the Pi Phis and the Kappas, there's Pi Phi and Kappa duo dances at every major university in the country. They were founded at Little Monmouth College in the 1800s, and I used to know all the
A Pi
details.
Phi. I was a Pi Phi at
You're
my
a Pi Phi?
school.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, come visit the whole house.
Oh
Anyway,
my gosh, that's
yeah, the Pi
wow,
Phi's
what a
and Kappas.
coincidence.
What's funny is that if you ask the people at, let's see, what school is it? Wesleyan in Georgia, they will say they are the birthplace of the women's sorority system. And if you ask the people in Indiana, they will tell you that they were the birthplace of the women's sorority system. And of course, Monmouth thinks that they are the birthplace of the because the Pi Phis were originally IC cirrhosis. You might remember that. And then you
I don't
don't.
remember. I wasn't a great Pi Phi sister, I gotta
Oh,
say.
okay.
I loved it, but that's a whole nother conversation about
Anyway,
sorority rush. But I think
that
it's super interesting. I had no idea. Like that's why I love this. Like I I fall in that group of like, okay, I didn't think that liberal arts colleges had no Greek life, but you immediately think of like the big state schools and the rah-rah. You don't think, Greek, all the big Greek row and all that. And you always think big college. You don't think that small, especially smaller liberal arts colleges would even have a Greek system. Like Monmouth, how many kids are there?
Monmouth has a total of 800 students on campus.
Yeah, so that's tiny, right?
It
And
is
they have a Greek system. You would never think.
like super active. And another misconception about the small liberal arts colleges has to do with things like research. I mean, if a student wants to really do their own original research instead of just helping a faculty member do their research, there's nothing like small private colleges. A lot of times they have the kind of facilities that a major university has, but they just don't have as many of them because
Yeah,
they're smaller
the
schools.
quantity is
Because
smaller, but they
Right,
have
because
them.
people that graduate from these schools a lot of times give back lots of money to build beautiful science buildings and things like that. And so, like a school like Monmouth, they even have kids do research before they start as a freshman. They have a program called Sophia where the students come in small groups of 3 or 4 and do research for 3 weeks before school begins, and they get paid a stipend and get to live on campus at no cost and do research that's in some cases continues throughout their 4 years and is publishable. And then there's a whole summer opportunities, research opportunities at most of the really good small private liberal arts colleges in the country. So a lot of people they don't know about all the opportunities in STEM and science and things like that at the small private liberal arts colleges. Another misconception has to do with cost. Because once you stay away from the really highly competitive, popular small private colleges, let me backtrack. There are about 750 small private liberal arts colleges in the country. There's about 50 of them you've heard of.
Yeah.
And those 50 ask for a lot of money and they don't give a discount because they don't need to, because there's people in line waiting to get there. The others are really good schools, but they need more students. They don't just want students, they need more students. And they're good schools. And so they tend to get really good merit scholarships
Yeah.
for
Yeah, and that's the just for our audience. That's the non-need based money
yeah.
that is based on the student. Yeah. And to what Peter's saying, that these 50 you've heard of, most of them will be good at need-based aid if you happen to be eligible for need, but they just a lot of those kind of schools, they just don't offer merit aid because they don't need to, right? All the kids have a
Yeah.
certain profile and they don't need that to attract that student. It's just kind of their quote unquote business plan.
Yeah.
But yeah,
These
I just think it's really interesting what you said before about the research. And you even went even deeper. Like you can start your own research. So if you go to, like, my son went to Indiana University, love it. Go Hoosiers, right? It was a great fit for him. But you're going in there, if you're a kid who wants to do research, maybe junior, senior year, if you're a go-getter, you might find a professor who might let you help because there's grad students. There's grad students that are there to do research and everything. But starting your own research, like that kind of stuff is just in my mind, would be almost unheard of at a bigger, more research institution that has grad students. And when you're, how many, 5 years ago, maybe, I toured all the Claremont colleges. And at Claremont McKenna, this is in California, the kid who did our tour, he had just graduated and he was still hanging out before he was going to start his job in September. And when he told us his resume, he was like, he had done theater and this and that. He already had a job. He had a really good job lined up, but he loved school, so he was still hanging out and giving back and doing tours. And he was like, well, he had done, his resume had like 8 things on it, like substantial things, and they were all different that he was able to do. And to your point, Peter, like it started freshman year, he was able to get with a professor and start doing research in a certain area of something he was interested in. And then that's just a huge thing about liberal arts colleges is there aren't grad students, so you have more at your fingertips to be able to do. I was blown away by this kid, and he was articulate. I mean, he had his you know what together, right? He was a together kid who was employed and was very mature, and I was just shocked. It wasn't the
speaking
typical college kid that you come across.
speaking of placement, speaking of getting a job, every small private college that I've researched has had between 90 and 99% placement within 6 months after graduation. People say you study liberal arts, you cannot get a job. That is ridiculous. I mean, first
Yeah.
of all, liberal arts includes things like pre-med, it includes things like pre-law, it includes things like, engineering, it includes things like nursing. It isn't just people studying art and weaving baskets.
No, but you're exactly right. My husband said that a while ago. I have 2 kids that are done with college. He's like, not that they didn't ever talk about liberal arts, but he's like, well, you can't get a job. And I'm like, that's
Well,
just not true.
they do internships. They give so many internship opportunities for students. I mean, one student a couple years ago did an internship in the West Wing of the White House. Another one had an opportunity to go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester and work side by side with a research project with a guy who won a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was like as a sophomore. I mean, the opportunities that students have at these small private liberal arts colleges are awesome. Sure, you don't have the big, 40,000 rah, 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 your resume. I mean, a lot of people that go to the big rah, rah, their resume is their name. And I went to class and I got a 3.4 and I had fun with my friends on weekends. And that's their resume,
Yeah.
unfortunately, for thousands of people. And then they wonder why they don't get a job. Small private liberal arts colleges, you cannot graduate without doing stuff that makes your resume like this.
Yeah.
My
It's
son
just
tried really
it's
hard to
there.
graduate without a long resume, but he finally did.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I always tell parents, ultimately, you're spending this money and your child's going to school so they get prepared to figure out what their next chapter is and how they're going to impact the world. And to your point, at 4-year bigger institutions, can you find it? Sure. If you're this kid who shows up and you're navigating and you're pushing and you have a lot of intuition, sure, you can, the opportunities there won't be as many because it's just a different environment. And like I said, you're competing against grad students and yada yada. But so you can find it at those places. But to your point, if you did a survey or you did a study and you looked at kids at the 4-year bigger schools versus the liberal arts, it's just there's more at their fingertips. Like even when I went on those tours, one of the schools in that consortium, I'll never forget this because it blew me away. Every Thursday morning, as part of the food service, like you're just on the meal plan, they had a breakfast and you could sign up and say, I want to be at the I want to eat there instead of wherever in your dining hall. And they would have a speaker, and it might be like they said sometimes, it was an LA graffiti artist, but one time it was Condoleezza Rice. Like it was a huge person. And if you signed up early enough, you could sit at the table with her. And when she was done speaking, you ate with her. And I came home and I told my kids to the point they were like, could you stop saying about this, Mom? We heard you, because I was just blown away. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, what? Like, if I had gone to a liberal arts college, because I didn't really, I kind of thought I knew what I wanted to do, but, and it's so dynamic. There's so much there. And like they were saying, professors will invite kids over to dinner once in a while.
Oh,
Or if a kid's a violin player and has like a performance, a professor will go to it. It's not that the bigger schools are bad, they're just different. And so the point of this is for people to understand, like, thinking about your child and where they might thrive. Because as people have heard me say over and over again, what really matters is where your child is going to thrive, not the rankings and not what everybody else does. So if we're talking about a liberal arts college, like if you had to describe like what sort of student thrives there, what would you how
well,
would you describe that?
I think I said this right at the beginning. It's a student who wants to do everything.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
they don't want to just major in something. They want to be involved in about 10 different things on campus, and they can do that at a small private college because there's no way that's going to stop them. I mean, they can make up their own major if they want to. At most of these colleges, be in 12 different organizations. All they have to do is say, here I am. I want to, and I want to start a club or organization. I recruited the guy who became the mascot, the first mascot ever. People didn't know who was inside the mascot the entire fall season. He would not reveal to the world, who he was, but he was my recruit, and it's fun. And the people that graduate from these small private colleges, it's amazing. Like the person who is the CEO right now of Morningstar Corporation, one of the biggest business corporations in the world,
Yeah.
is a graduate of Monmouth. We call him KK. His name is Kudak Kapoor. And I did coffee with him recently. And I said, how did you get so famous so fast? He said, well, I was having a beer with Dr. Keefe about 2 o'clock in the morning one time. And Doc Keefe was a chemistry professor, had nothing to do with business, right? And Doc Keefe said, I know you're destined for greatness. He says, but what you have to do is you work for a company. And when they ask you to do, who wants to do a certain job, and it's a job that nobody wants to do, he says, you have to be the first to volunteer and do really well. And then the next time a crappy job comes along, volunteer, do the best you can, and then you're going to rise. And it happened. And he became the president of the company by 35 and a CEO by 45.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comes back to campus, and sits and talks to students, and he's the CEO of Morningstar Corporation. And it's not the only example. I mean, there's people in high places that graduate from these small colleges. Sure, they went to graduate school, like he went to graduate school at Chicago,
Chicago.
of course, which
Yeah.
is one of the top in the world. Of course, he got his master's there, but he got his master's while he was working for Morningstar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk about that for a minute. Like, where do the graduates from these schools, where do they just, you don't have to give me exact
Heck,
numbers, but I'm
all
sure some go in the workforce, some go into, grad school, just like any student leaving. I'm assuming they're successful getting into the
yeah,
programs
I
they
mean,
want to get
every
into.
college is different. With Monmouth, about 10% of the students would immediately go to graduate school, and the rest would go into the workforce. With
You
about
said
99%,
10%? 10%?
about 10% went to graduate school immediately, but 25% eventually went on for a master's or a PhD. So not everybody would immediately go on.
Right. And that's changing too.
Right.
Everything's
And
changing
then the
now. So,
other, like 89%, they had 99% placement every year I was there. And the other 89% would go directly into the workforce. And people would say, well, wasn't a job directly related to their major? That really does not matter because only 27% of people in this world do something related to their major when they were in
yeah.
college. And that's a whole different subject.
Yeah, I'm not. What
Yeah.
I'm ultimately ended up doing now for the last 2 decades was not tied to my major. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean,
Everybody, the main thing about those stats that to me matters, that some colleges, they'll say placement, da da da, as long as it's not flipping burgers, it's got to be a professional job that's, career, you can make a career out of, it's a part of a career path, not just any job that's putting in a paycheck. But to your point,
yeah,
if you're a such and such major, it doesn't have to be exactly doing that. And I also think what you said at the beginning, and I knew this, but I bet you some of our listeners don't, that like this misconception that what you're going to study at a liberal arts college is philosophy, sociology, anthropology. Like you'd never study nursing or business or engineering, and it's just absolutely not true. It's going to be a Caltech is a different kind of engineering program than one of these liberal arts colleges that has I remember when I toured Harvey Mudd and they were like, we don't want the typical engineering kid. They're wonderful, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for an engineering student who has all those specs to get into a Caltech, but is passionate about the violin. That's exactly what this guy said, or something else. It didn't have to be violin, but it's what you've been saying. Like it's a kid that is kind of different, right? When it comes to engineering and wants to, like you're saying, do it all, which I like, but has other interests besides just that specific major.
yeah, and
Does
they
that kind of rings with what you've been sharing?
yeah, they have a tendency to, even if they started out flipping a burger, they would eventually own the company. These kids, uh, they tend to rise quickly in the hierarchy. The person who is the superintendent of schools at the Geneva school system in Geneva, Illinois, which is a big school district, is a graduate I recruited from Monmouth. And I mean, he's like 45 years old and already the superintendent of schools of a huge school district. People rise really quickly. The former CEO of Ford Motor Company was a Monmouth alum. The former CEO of Oscar Mayer was, and with the invention of the Wienermobile and stuff like that. He doesn't claim that he was responsible for that, but we think he was responsible for that.
So, what other schools were you at besides Monmouth?
Mostly work, mostly Wartburg, which was the school I went to. I worked for Wartburg for like 6 years. I was director of admission for a couple of years at St. Francis Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was director for a couple of years at Lindenwood in the St. Louis area. For a couple of years, I was the AVP at Park University in the Kansas City area. But I found out that I didn't like administration. I was not a good administrator. I was a really good recruiter, but I was hated having to tell people they're fired and
Yeah, the
telling
admin
students
stuff.
they're not
Yeah. I was
accepted.
just curious, yeah, what
And
other schools. So, what about like financial stability, especially now with all the stuff going on with the current administration and reaching out to colleges and universities and cuts. They, like you mentioned, they tend to be good at giving these merit scholarships, and they're sizable. Typically they're into
yeah,
five figures and they're almost always guaranteed for 4 years. Have you seen any issues with schools where they're just not going to be able to, they don't have the 50 billion plus endowment that a Harvard has, that they'll be financially stable? Obviously it's each college you got to look at
uh,
separately, but just can you
uh,
comment on that?
you definitely have to do your research. I have I kind of like what Forbes does, their ABCD thing. Some years they're really conservative and give everybody D's, and in other years they're more liberal and give most people B's. So I take an average of the last 3 years, for example, when I'm trying to recommend colleges to people. And if they're recommending at least a B, A, B, C, at least a B, I feel pretty confident, to refer them to people. But I mean, sometimes those C plus, they try harder, and they have alums that are very loyal and they can make their dollar stretch so far. You have to really admire them. So just be careful, do your research. It doesn't hurt to find a school that's got an endowment that's at least a couple 100,000 per student.
Yeah,
That
yeah. And
what's
that
it?
information, you can find it online and you can ask
Yeah,
questions and you can look at different departments. If a department is super small and they don't graduate barely any kids, sometimes that's where colleges will say, well, we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of takers over here. Maybe that's something that we will discontinue. It's always been true that parents should be researching that, but it's just something you have to look
Right.
at, the
One
financial stability.
thing I have noticed that colleges are doing, and I know it's a bit of the tail wagging the dog, but they're doing away with some majors that are traditional liberal arts like history and Latin and stuff like that, and putting more of their money into engineering and nursing and data science and computer science and education, shifting their funds. That's not a bad thing, but it's basically nobody wants to study Latin anymore. Nobody wants to major in
Right.
thus and such.
Yeah.
And so it is a bit of the tail wagging the dog. But colleges are pretty good about stretching their money. Yeah, they discount a lot. The average discount rate is 56%.
I know.
And
It just keeps going. It keeps going up.
and
I've
there
been
are
tracking
colleges
it
that
for
discount
years.
by 71%. And it's like, how can you make ends meet when you do that?
I
But
know. That's why I asked you. And we were at, I just went to the NAFSA conference, which is all the financial aid administrators back in June. And there was one liberal arts college in one of the panels. And he said, it's getting a little hard because we keep increasing our discounts. And this school costs, sticker price about 80 grand. And, but almost none of the kids pay 80 grand. So he was like, it's a bit of a balancing act. So to your point, it makes sense from a business standpoint. We might focus more on the majors that are going to bring in more kids. I mean, it's they're nonprofits, but they gotta make money. So
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
all of that makes perfect sense. And I just think these, for our listeners, like these kind of, that's why I wanted to have you come on, Peter, because these kind of schools, your child can get an engineering degree that has the ABET that you were talking about at the beginning, Peter. And they come out very well-rounded student with a really, really nice resume. That's really the name of the game. It's like I remember my son at IU. I mean, he walked in as a sophomore to Kelly School of Business, highly regarded School of Business, and they were like, "Yeah, it's going to be really hard as a sophomore to get an internship this summer after your sophomore year." That's just the nature of the beast. That's how they do it, and the employers that come and look for kids. Whereas at another school that offers business, he could have potentially been doing stuff, earlier. It was a great fit for him, and he found other things that he got involved in and had a great resume. It's just at these small liberal arts colleges or the liberal arts colleges, it's there. You have to go after it, but it's there. So
of
yeah.
opportunities, lots of
Yeah, do you
opportunities at
do you
small
want to
private
talk
colleges.
for a minute about the colleges that changed lives? Just because some people might have heard of it. It's about 40,
Yes,
right, Peter, schools?
this was back in 1996.
Yeah, I have the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lauren Pope. I have a copy of it here too.
Yeah, yeah.
I was really disappointed that he didn't come up with a volume two, volume three, volume four because he only touched on 44 out of the 744 colleges in the country. They're good schools for everything that I just talked about. Only two of them have engineering with the ABET certification, but
And that's Cornell College in Iowa, is
yeah,
what he's
Cornell
talking
College in
about.
Iowa.
Yeah, not
Uh,
Cornell
but
University. Yeah.
that's just the tip of the iceberg, the 44 colleges that are listed in CTCL. I wish that there'd been a volume two, three, four, because there's a lot of good schools that were just missed.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
always a disadvantage for me at a college for not having that little sign on my table that I was a CTCL school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, so basically it's a resource,
it's a
but it's
great
not the be
resource.
end all, is what you're saying. There's
Correct, correct.
a
But
lot of schools to look
look
at.
beyond those 44.
Yeah. Well, if we're gonna wrap up here, I'm gonna give my takeaways because I've got a bunch. I learned so much from you. But what would be like one or two takeaways for people from our conversation today?
I think it's basically the main takeaway is the opportunities that the students get. If students want a school where they're going to actually do stuff instead of watching other people do stuff, this is the way to go. Uh, And also the cost factor, you can really save yourself a lot of money staying away from some of the highly ranked arts colleges. Now they're fine too, but if you're willing to spend 85 or $90,000, if that's not an issue for you, go for it. They're wonderful institutions. But there's a lot of places where you can save yourself a lot of money. I guess those are my takeaways.
Yeah, yeah, I would say, what I picked up from you was one, there's Greek life at a lot of these schools, which I think a lot of kids are very interested in. So that doesn't knock liberal arts colleges off the list. Now, it doesn't mean every school has it, but so you have to look. I already knew this, but these kids are very employable. And again, as
Yeah.
parents, when I was sending my kids, I'm like, yeah, I want you to have fun. I want you to work hard, play hard, halfway grow up because we're still paying the bills, but have this cool next chapter. But ultimately, you need to be out of my house by the end of the summer after you graduate with the job that hopefully you're happy with. That's the goal. And so, I could tell you stories of kids from all different schools that graduate with a decent amount of money spent, maybe some debt, and they just can't get a job, or they can't even get a job that they can make ends meet on. So that's huge. But the big thing, the last thing I'll say is quoting you, Peter, like the kid that should go to these schools or consider them and add some of these to the list and do some research, or the kids that they want to do it all. They don't want to just study their major and get really deep. That's fine. Not knocking that, but they want to do it all. They want to get their foot in here and do this and maybe start a club or be in a club. And you can start clubs at other schools too, but you just want to do it all. And you want to have, I mean, small teeny colleges wasn't a great fit for my kids, but for a lot of kids that I work with and family, that's what they want. That's where they're going to thrive, not at a giant college where they're just going to kind of get lost in the shuffle. And for a lot of families, they feel like that it's these private, super selective schools, or I'll just stay in state. And neither one of those are bad options, but there's so many. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, Peter, it was like, okay, my kid's going to apply early decision wherever, Brown, or they're going to go to University of Washington. And when I lived in Seattle, I'm like, there's so many other schools in between that there's so many other options. And so that's really why I wanted to have you on, just to really kind of get in the weeds on this option and to bring the point across. Like, it doesn't have to be these 50 colleges that are there's nothing wrong with them, but there's over 700 of them, and I've always been a huge advocate for your kids should go where they thrive, and they're going to meet the professors and do the stuff that is them. And that degree, sure, are there alumni networks? Yeah. But all these schools, Monmouth, as you said, this guy at Morningstar, he comes back to campus. Like, he loves where he went, and he probably gives money, and he goes back there and he gives back. So that's not exclusive to the Ivies. I hear people say that all the time. There's strong alumni networks at a lot of schools. So just, you think I was getting a rev share from the liberal arts college, whatever organization. I'm really not. But I just think these schools, if it's a good fit for a student, parents should really think about it and introduce it, because it could be a great next step for a lot of
At
kids.
least visit to some of these good small private colleges.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you visit, I mean, you should do this at any school. It's like, and I remember my dad said this to me when I was in high school, and I was like, I don't want to do that, but I did it. Like, just stop some random kid on campus and talk to them, go and sit in a class, go up to the professor after. Does the professor have time to chat with you for 5 minutes? All of that stuff kind of gives you a feel for the school. So, all right. Well, Peter, thank you so, so much. This was interesting. Even though I've
Thank you for
already
the
talked to
opportunity.
you, I learned a few things about liberal arts colleges that I didn't know. So it's great.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please follow us, share the show, and maybe even send it to a parent or counselor who you think would enjoy it. I'm your host, Peg Keogh, and I was joined by our special guest, Peter Pitts, a retired college admissions rep at several liberal arts colleges. This episode was produced by the wonderful Eileen Campbell. Have a great rest of your day. Excited to see you back next time.